We are recording so that we can have the replays just for the purposes of housekeeping. All right, will we get going? It is 1 minute past. I'm sure we can let anybody in that needs to join us. Just for the purposes of this, if everybody keeps themselves muted, that will be brilliant. It just keeps it nice and clear. We should just be the hour, as I said. If we run over, hopefully you can stay with us. We have much to do, much to get through and much to do. So let me set the, oh good, Thomas, not too bad then. You can understand. If I get quicker, you'll be all right, Thomas. Thomas from Glasgow, he's saying he'll be able to pick that accent up, no problem. So we have much to do, much to get through in the 4 days that we have together. And then we have a, not a surprise, but an addition next Monday. So we have 4 live days, and then next Monday I'm hoping to kind of bring these together for one last piece of the puzzle. But what we're going to do today is I'm going to introduce you to a model that has been cultivated and created over the last probably 10 years. The model has been in practice for a long time and has had some incredible clinical outcomes. So what I'm going to try and do for you is take you through it. Now, the model isn't just an intellectual framework. It comes in the back of thousands of hours of practice. And there's a lot of practitioners here today that have been practicing with this model, and they might lend their voice to this, so I'm not just a lonely voice. Now, why is that important? It's important for many reasons. There is so much information out there on anxiety, you'll all agree. And it is one of the most difficult subjects, I think, as practitioners to work with. And I equally think it's one of the most difficult things to have as a client. So when I talk about clients, I'm actually talking interchangeably about ourselves, because we are both clients and we are both therapists. And so I'm talking from the human condition. I'm talking from the experience of the human self. I'm talking from a very personal place. So you'll hear that language interchangeably. I'm absolutely passionate about changing how anxiety is treated and trained. And we've been steadily making inroads, and that's what we're going to do tonight. I fundamentally believe that the shift towards the body, and I know you're going to be rolling your eyes already, right? But stay with me, please, right? The fundamental shift towards the body in totality as a way to remedy anxiety is too far left. Equally, the shift or the understanding of it's all in the mind is too far right. There has to be some middle ground. This has to be about the interplay between both the mind and the body, and the interconnection of the spirit or the essence. So that's the place that we're going to come at over the next 4 days. Is everybody all right with that? Everybody happy enough with that? So there is an assumption on my part, and the assumption on my part is that most of you are showing up here with a basic understanding of the autonomic nervous system. That most of you are showing up here as therapists, because this is a therapist forum, with a basic understanding of hypo and hyperarousal. I am not going to teach you to suck eggs. I'm not going through all of that material that can be found anywhere on the internet. Or a short Google search will show you dorsal vagal toning, dorsal vagal nerve theory. It'll show you all of the SE, Peter Levine, fantastic stuff. We are going to build upon that tonight. That's not going to be the focus of this. And it's not going to be the focus for the 4 days, 4 weeks. Heaven forbid, says you. 4 days is enough for the 4 days that we're together. Is it okay for everybody else? Okay. So I'm trying to set the context for what we're about to do. This framework is incredibly important for us as therapists, so that we have somewhere, as I call, to hang our coats, so that we are able to navigate systematically what is in front of us. But to be honest, it's more important to the client that's sitting in front of us, who are absolutely lost. And that's what we're seeing time and time again. Clients who've tried everything. And that's fundamentally what this is about tonight. It's about the client. Although I'm trying to help you, but I'm helping you so that you can help your client. That's my number one goal in life, is to try and see if we can get as many people as possible to understand this stuff, to train in this stuff, and then ultimately to help people that are anxiety. As a matter of interest, can I ask of the people in front of me that I can see, or anybody, I know some of you are training therapists and some of you are actually in practice, how many of you have experienced anxiety, panic, or disassociation in your own lives? Yeah, so you know it. So that's the place I'm coming from today. I'm coming from that heart-centered, honest to God, backed in research, backed with a foundation, honest to God, solid place of helping. Any questions, stick it in the chat. So, are we ready to begin? 7 minutes. And one more thing I just wanted to say before we actually begin. Do you know the way when you come to these summits, people spend an awful lot of time talking about themselves? I don't want to do that, even though we've 4 days together, which is why in our communications, I've sent you the TED Talk, why in communications, I maybe have sent you out some literature, sent you out so that you might have done your due diligence before you've arrived, so that you'll have looked at my background, you'll have looked at my basic education, you'll have looked at where this information is coming from, and that hopefully is enough to help you feel secure enough in the knowledge that I'm sharing. There's also people who have availed of the service that are here, and if they want to use their voice as well, that's perfect. So that said, if you want to know a wee bit more about me or about my work, then just reach out to Leona and she'll send you all of the links, but I'm not going to waste your time tonight. We're just going to get into the detail of this. Happy enough, Josephine? Happy enough, Anne? Happy enough, Amy? Brilliant. Okay, Rachel, I can see you now too. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the therapeutic exchange. The beginning of it all when our client comes to us. So when we talk about therapeutic exchange, what I want to do is slow the entire process down and give you a framework for therapeutic exchange. What are we looking for? And why are we looking for these key points at the very, very, very beginning? Now, what I would like you to do for me is I'd like you to think about your client cohorts. Of all the clients that you have, I want you to keep the ones that have anxiety in mind. And because as I introduce this material, I want you to apply it to your client base. All right. And I want you to use the chat for me. Now, the reason that I'll ask you to use the chat is so that everybody can see that we're all moving in the right direction and we're all struggling with the same stuff. We're all coming up against the same difficulties when we're trying to treat anxiety. So if you would do me that favor, thank you, Chin. Good to see you. Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk about is, it goes without saying, the core conditions, right? I'm person-centered trained. I spent too long knee deep in Carol Rogers' gorgeous work. And so the first thing is, look, I'm not going to teach you to suck eggs, but core conditions have to be laid down. We have to have empathy. We have to have unconditional positive regard. We have to have the basics. That goes without saying. But if we move beyond that tonight, right? And if we start to look at what else is required, what is required in us, what is required from us is an understanding of where the client shows up in terms of the stages of process. Now, that is an incredibly important part of assessing anxiety. So where does the client show up in terms of stage of process? Would you be able to assess that as we speak? So if we think about stages of process, so stage 1 is that the client doesn't really have a problem and they're mandated to be with you. Anybody mandated to be with you? Anybody there in session because they've been told to be there? Anybody there out of having to be there legally? Anybody there out of having to be there for family, keep relationships together? Anybody in that place? So stage 1. Stage 2, I have a problem, but it's not nothing to do with me. It's not here. It's not in me. Anybody working with clients there? It's everything externally. Yes, Anne. Yeah, brilliant. Let me know in the chat. It's every single thing outside me. Anybody there? Let me know in the chat. Yeah, stage 2. Stage 3 is very similar, but stage 3, they're starting to become more accustomed to it's a feeling or a sense of something internally. But mostly from 1 to 3, you're talking about an externalization of the problem, an identification that is outside themselves, that doesn't belong to themselves. Yeah. Stage 4 and 5 gets a bit deeper. So 4 and 5 is, I have a problem and I think this problem is outside, but I'm also aware that it might be inside. I'm not really sure what it is. I can't really put my finger on it. I think it might be A, I think it might be B, but they're scrambling for answers. How many of your clients are scrambling for answers? Let me know in the chat. So are you more up at the lower ends of stage process, 1, 2, or 3, or are you more 4, 5, and 6, and then 7 then is full fluidity? Where are you? Okay. Not stage 1, brilliant. 4, 5, 6, brilliant, Caroline, fantastic. Okay, Thomas, you're more, okay, so a wee bit more depth in the engagement with a client in terms of what they understand, where they understand it to be. Fair enough. Okay, 3, 4, and 5, mostly 4 and 5. Okay. Now, why is stages of process important? Because stages of process denote the amount of psychosomatic unity. So if I was to ask you where your client is in terms of their ability for their mind and body to be connected, so for their mind to understand what their body is doing and what their body to feed back to the mind. Or have they good levels of psychosomatic unity, or do you find them not in their bodies at all? Good or bad? How do you find that? It's a really important question. It's normally very linked to the stage of process, because a client who's at a higher stage of process will be able to articulate that is within. They'll be able to articulate the emotional content. They'll be able to articulate that, mostly not body aware. Do you see the importance of this for when you're treating anxiety is incredible. So brilliant. Caroline, you've just differentiated experiencing sensations with the sensations of anxiety, but no connection to the emotion. So that's a lower stage of process. So they can feel the feelings of anxiety or panic or possible hyperarousal. Yeah. But they can't be in their body. Yeah. Most clients are not in their body. They were disconnected. Yes, yes. A lot of clients, and this is why this has to be our first assessment. Can I get you all to look at the chat? Look at your colleagues. Look at your colleagues' information. It's incredible. Yeah. Not body connected. Same as Caroline. Not know the physical indicators of anxiety, but have no connection to the emotional body. Now we're starting to pair the stage of process with our psychosomatic unity, and we're starting to see differentiations. Yes, they can know where the problem is, but they mightn't be able to locate it inside their body. Now, why is this important? Why are these two things important? They're important because for this very reason, a client will stay stuck in story. A client will ruminate, because the depth, the capacity, and the skill that they have to deepen into the unconscious, to deepen into the body, is not there. So no matter what intervention you have at this stage, when you're understanding your client and what stage of process they're coming at, we are understanding the problems that will come and the problems that you have because you are faced with. Stuck in story, ruminating, blaming, pointing out the ways. These are all stages of process problems. These are all psycho unity problems. And what's amazing is the same thing is coming through from everyone who's typing here, which I love, that most people can feel the physical symptoms of their body, but they cannot feel the emotional content in their body. So they're a lower stage of process with little psychosomatic unity in the emotional world, able to understand their anxiety symptoms, which was just probably brought them there, which moves them up the stage of the process. Now that in and of itself is a great assessment. And I want you to get used to assessing that the entire time. Now we're going to layer this up. And so the next question that I have for you is, what is your client's levels of metacognition? So are they able to think about what they're thinking about? Are they able to report what their mind is doing? Are they able to give you information? Are they able to self-report what's going on in their own heads? Or are they completely lost? Now we're going to bring all of this together. Okay, so let me know. So have they got good metacognition? Have they got good psychosomatic unity? It's all, yes, they mentalize everything, they intellectualize everything, but are they able to, intellectualization is different. So are they able to, they're aware of the rumination patterns. So some of them are aware of what they're thinking and how they're thinking. This becomes a vital component of the work that you will do down the line. And your assessment of how they show up becomes absolutely vital. Yeah. Stuck in rumination, absolutely. So are they able to report how they're thinking? Are they able to talk about how they're thinking? Are they able to become aware of what they're thinking? And then the next assessment that I want you to think about is the assessment of introspection. Now I'm going to share a wee document with you on that. I don't think you have this in your note pack, but that is easy remedied. So when we talk about the client's capacity to be in their body, we have very carefully differentiated between their capacity to be in their emotional world and their capacity to be in their physical world. So their sensations of anxiety. So what we want here is we want to understand at what levels are your clients operating at an introspection level? Can they bring attention and observe their body sensations? Can they detect where it is? Can they describe the intensity of it? Can they correctly monitor it and see where it goes without responding to it? And can they self-report? Now, just as a matter of interest, put in the chat how many of your clients can do that, because that's a really hard task, isn't it? And it's an important question. All of this stuff is an important question. Put in the chat if your client can do that. Much resistance. Absolutely, Kim. Absolutely. Now, why am I building this picture? If we are to access, if we are to help a client, if we're to help a client understand the root cause of their anxiety, yeah? If we're to help the client be with the unconscious material that may arise from the body, if we're to help a client understand that material as it arises, if we are to help a client differentiate between the mind's functions and the neuroception, the real threat, then we're going to need basic skills. And we can't jump ahead. We can't expect just the relationship. And I'm person-centered trained, so nobody sent me emails. So we can't expect just the relationship to do that work. It's a very particular skill that needs to be built up inside the client for them to be able to understand themselves at a really deep level. So let's just recap it again, right? First thing, what is their stage of process? Because if they're externalizing, they cannot begin to internalize the process. That's the stage of process. What is their levels of psychosomatic unity, and can we differentiate it? And further from that, can we understand where their introspection levels are at and how good those introspection levels are? Now, this will all come together, I promise you, right? And it gives you a framework for why clients get stuck, gives you a framework for why clients can't self-report, gives you a framework for why clients ruminate. So then we want to understand metacognition, which is just clients self-reporting. And then what that gives us this framework, which is perfect. Now, why is all of that important? Because if that is not there, then we can't deepen. We've no chance. But the next assessment becomes incredibly important as well. What are your clients' levels of nervous system activation? What are they reporting? And at their worst experience, what does it feel like for them? So are the clients in severe hyperarousal followed by hypo? Or are they just straight to hypoarousal? How far outside the window of tolerance are they stretching? What's that elastic band look like? Yeah, and that's a really important point. Chen has just said we build these as we go along. It's a really important point. So at the moment, what's your clients' levels of activation? Are they very strong? Are most of your clients coming severely activated, up in the panic regions, maybe close to hypoarousal at the other end? Let me know in the chat how your clients are presenting. Yeah, absolutely. As far as adolescents, some practitioners are out there using it for adolescents, but certainly not for children, Ella, I'm afraid. Because of the skill base it's needed to develop. So tell me, what levels of nervous system activation are your clients showing up with? Yeah, Ruth, that's tough at the top end of arousal. That is tough. Okay, so severe, Laura. Yeah. Okay, clients at not level of panic attack, but in a severe state, hyperarousal. Brilliant. Okay, so you can see a lot of these are working with clients that are severely aroused and severe hyperarousal and then moving down. And this becomes, incredibly important. If they're already in a state of hyperarousal, then what we understand and what we know for sure, because you experience it, is that the mind will lock the body out of any deeper process. And the client will cling on to story. They'll cling on to blame. They'll cling on to where they are. They'll cling on to ruminations. They cling on to the functions of the mind, which I'm going to explain in a wee bit more detail now in a minute. They'll get stuck in story. They'll not be in their window of tolerance, so that they cannot move beyond the place that they're in. They'll be stuck identifying with the people, the places, the things that the mind has identified that is causing the anxiety. And they will ruminate and ruminate and ruminate around that, because there is fundamentally no capacity, both within the nervous system and within the total organism, to go any further, to deepen any further, to make sense of what is happening. And that becomes an incredibly important point, because what we're saying here is most of the interventions at this stage don't work. Yeah, they have no capacity. They're stuck in, that's exactly right, Anna. They have no capacity. So what I'm trying to do in our first session is I'm trying to quantify and qualify the capacity that is needed, so that we know now where to go. Because we know entering in the story with a client, we know running around after the people, places, and the things is fruitless, because that's the level of awareness. We call it shelves of awareness. That's the shelf of awareness that the capacity, that the organism has capacity for. There is one other, we're going to do this in real detail tomorrow night because I can't give it all to you tonight, but there's one major factor also in this, and it runs alongside metacognition. And it's what I have termed the functions of the mind. Now, the functions of the mind are an incredibly powerful thing, and it's connected to our neuroception. But fundamentally, what happens is in the need to source, identify, name, and solve the pain within, the mind will do that. It'll source, it'll solve, it'll identify what it fundamentally believes is the source of its pain, its source of its activation. And very often the mind gets that wrong. The mind gets that identification wrong. Now there's a whole science behind that we'll do tomorrow night. So if you have this natural propensity in the organism to identify, yes, it can be skewed, exactly. The source is so badly skewed, Caroline. If you have this propensity in the organism, in every human being, this desire, this need to identify the pain, we think about how it's part of the actualizing tendency, how it's very Freudian, I know, but when you think about that, when that function is going on in the mind, the client is reporting to you what it believes the anxiety is, what it believes the source of the panic is. They're reporting to you where it believes the story is, where it believes it. So they're reporting to you, and we have a case study here, they're reporting to you the husband that's not giving enough love, the husband that's not putting enough hearts and flowers into the relationship. They're reporting to you the husband that goes out with his friends at the weekend. They're reporting to you the flash of a phone that the client is fixated on. And that's the level in which they have identified the fear, the anxiety. And only if they could get more love, only if they could be safer in their attachments, only if they could get what they need from their resourcing. So that is what the client gets trapped in. If a client gets trapped there, which we all do as human beings, if a client gets trapped there with no capacity to deepen, either from a metacognition point of view or from an introspection point of view, if they've no capacity and then they're outside their window of tolerance, meaning that their body is just in a hyper-arousal state, if you stood on your head and spun around 20 times, it isn't going to make any difference to that client's stage of process. Because we have to learn to work with the mind's functions. We have to learn to build the skills in the client, and we have to learn to actually create these windows of tolerance first. So there's a whole body of skill here that we actually can make an absolute massive impact on. Now, does that need done first? And I think, Chin, you've alluded to that. Is that like a whole body of work before you even deepen? No. It's a process that you can engage in every single session. You can deliberately build these skills, deliberately build these windows of tolerance. And I know you've heard the word window of tolerance a million times. So how do we do that? We're coming to that. So, but the first thing is that we have to assess where the client is when they arrive, because many of our interventions that we've been taught don't fit the client's frame of reference. They don't fit the client's current capacity. And no matter how good you are and how purposeful and intentful you are, and I know the heart that goes in to sit in front of clients every single day wanting to help them. I know exactly. But it'll not matter, because there is an incapacity in the client that needs to be built out. So last but not least, the last assessment is your client's resourcing. How are your clients resourcing themselves? Joe, I'm glad it's making sense. How are your clients resourcing themselves? How are they soothing themselves? How are they placating this? How is the organism? How is the self soothing and taking away this anxiety, taking away this hypoarousal? What are they doing, either consciously or unconsciously, that's protecting them? Because that becomes a really important question. What happens for a lot of clients is that they're left, what they've chosen to resource themselves with, what they've chosen to resource themselves with is something that actually often ends up creating more of the same anxiety. And then they get into this looping effect. And in that state, it's very hard to work with, it's very hard to deepen, because what happens is the mind's function is on the thing that they're resourcing. Rachel, you're nodding. Yep. Yeah. So, yes, so we have to understand where they're resourcing, and as they're resourcing, actually lending itself to the continuation of the anxiety experience. And we have to try and work that out for them so that we can create as much support that doesn't add to the looping effect of anxiety. So, yes, Thomas, it's recording. I'll see you tomorrow evening. Good luck. Okay, so let me take a breath, right? All of those problems, all of that leads to these problems. Leads to red herrings in the therapeutic process. I call it playing whack-a-mole. You know the arcade game whack-a-mole, where one pops up, you whack it, and then you're running to another one and you're whacking that one. That's what it leads to. It leads to playing whack-a-mole therapeutically. It's exhausting for you, and it's more exhausting than you'll ever know for a client. So it leads to being stuck in story. It leads to an intolerance of the body that is so fruitful. It's the body so fruitful, but it leads to a complete intolerance of the body. And when it leads to an intolerance of the body, there is no deepening. It leads to trapped anxiety cycles, and it leads to shame and blame and ridicule and hopelessness. Yeah. And it leads to a client getting exhausted inside the therapeutic process and going to the next treatment, going to the next thing, going to the next new thing that's on the market, going to the next quick fix. And we as therapists know there is no quick fix to this. There is no 6-week process to that can help this. Not in its totality, in some of its single parts, yes, but not in its totality. And that's what happens. The client is then just like trying its best to try and resource itself and find an answer to the anxiety. Now I'm going to take a wee drink of my tea, take a breath. My cheeks are getting redder by the minute. I'm going to breathe. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add to that? Any questions, anything clarifying? So we're in point 1, therapeutic exchange. What do we have to assess in terms of therapeutic exchange? No problem at all, Pooja, no problem. Have a lovely evening. Anybody, any questions? Is it helpful? Is this helpful? Is it a helpful framing of the work that you're probably already doing? Yeah. Yes, good. So Laura's saying, so far it's helpful. It's reassuring for those stuck moments when we get pulled into chasing. Yes, because that's what happens. We chase red herrings. Tomorrow night is all about red herrings. It's all about the functions of the mind. See, when you understand it from this perspective, you'll not think about anxiety the same way once we get to tomorrow night. Good, I'm glad. Great for focus, Caroline. Brilliant. Okay. So when we understand the client that's showing up, and when we understand, yes, Chin, isn't that lovely? I love that. Celebrating yourself, celebrating the depth of your own work, fantastic. Chin saying, I didn't realise the depth and breadth of the work that I do. Sometimes things like this help us understand that we are working at a really deep level. And if all that I can do is take you a level deeper than when you're working at, then we're moving in that direction of helping people. Brilliant, Chin, love it, fantastic. Great, Wendy, thank you so much. Okay, so now, why is all of that important? It's important so we don't apply interventions that we know won't work. It's important so that we don't waste the client's energy. How many of you have been on a healing journey? You know what energy is required for a healing journey? Yes. It's an energy like no other energy, isn't it? It's an energy like no other energy. And it comes from a place of essence like no other energy. And it's exhausting. And when our clients get into that cycle of hope and hurt and despair, that's where we tend to lose them, and especially with anxiety and panic. Because what happens with anxiety and panic is that the physiological symptoms become unbearable, especially if they're up in hyper and hypoarousal. I mean, if anybody's ever experienced panic, it is the most excruciating thing in the world. I don't need to teach you that. It is horrific. It's horrific to feel that, and then to feel the weight of the core woundedness that lies beneath it. It's just horrific. So that's really important, but it's also incredibly important for this one thing. What's our next move? If our move isn't all the interventions that I've been taught, so what's the next step in the treatment? If the client doesn't have capacity, if they can't deepen, if the mind is playing red herring tricks, then what is, and if they're outside their window of tolerance, what is the next move? And that becomes point 2 in the treatment plan, to which I'm going to show you the diamond model now. I know you've seen it if you've got your notepad, but I'm going to show you the diamond model now for the visual purposes. Now, Kim, my camera has moved a wee bit. Kim, Tracy, Claire, Sadie, Rachel, user in front of me, Chan as well, user in front of me. I'm going to share this document, and will you let me know that you can see it and that it's all okay? Leona, all right in Facebook?
All good in Facebook. No, that's all quiet so far.
Oh, good. Okay. All right. So we've called a trigger here, but really what this is therapeutic exchange. This is the unpacking of the assessment that we've just done there now. The client will show up with what they're triggered by, but they show up with what they're triggered by with their levels of psychosomatic unity, their stage of process, their introspection, their metacognition, their levels of nervous system activation. So when a client shows up, they'll talk, and a lot of our clients talk about what's triggered them. A lot of our clients will have the capacity to explain that. But when they show up and start talking about that, what we're now understanding is behind that, there is a plethora of things going on in the organism that will block the client's ability to work with that trigger. Everybody all right with that? So a client doesn't just show up with trigger and has capacity for deepening. A client shows up with information, it shows up with therapeutic exchange. And what we're now assessing is all of those things that we've run through in relation to that trigger, in relation to that information. So our next thing, which is point 2, is we've just mentioned it there inside the trigger. what levels of intolerance do they have towards both the trigger and the physical symptoms of anxiety itself. These levels of intolerance become an incredibly important part of the picture. How many of your clients, and this will probably be at the severe end, how many of your clients are reducing their world, are reducing their people, are reducing their exposure to triggers, to places, to people, to things, to their body sensations because of sheer intolerance. How many of your clients are doing that? They have intolerance to the physical symptoms and they have intolerance to the trigger. When you get a client like that, and this is number one that we worked on today, and we'll get into the detail of that. Here's number two, we have to understand the levels of intolerance the client has. The levels of intolerance usually show up in the levels of nervous system activation. Your client has high levels of nervous system activation, hyperarousal, severe hyperarousal, panic, severe anxiety, amygdala hijack, that, then you are talking about severe intolerance of both the trigger and of both the body. There is no deepening, not one bit of deepening that can be done here. There is no explaining, there's nothing that can be done but build tolerance. Building tolerance of the symptoms first is the best way to build tolerance of the trigger. So what this assessment does is it allows us to ask the question, what is the client's capacity to be with the material that's causing this trigger, to deepen into it? And if their window of tolerance is short, and if they're outside that window of tolerance and they're intolerant of their symptoms, then that's your first step. Because there's no other work that can be done other than that work. Now we're going to take these parts and we're going to take 15 minutes and run through each part of this. But I wanted to show you, there's three massive parts of this process. First is the assessment of the therapeutic exchange of the trigger that's brought. The third is the settling of the body. And the fourth is a deepening of root cause so that we're eliminating the cause of the anxiety. So your question, in order to make whatever move it is you need to move, whatever intervention you need to move, is what levels of intolerance does my client have of this trigger? What levels of intolerance does my client have of their physical symptoms? That will often indicate where your first move is. If your client has low levels of introspection, if your client has low levels of metacognition, low levels of stage of process, parapsychosomatic unity, rumination, there is no work to be done in the mind first. You're going to shift gear and work at building all of these skills, but you're going to build it through the body. Now, we have 4 days. So day 3 is really all about that. I'm just showing you how this interacts. And from there, we then have and can build capacity into here. But if that's not assessed properly, your client and how many of your clients are going to bounce between trigger intolerance, physical symptoms, trigger intolerance, physical symptoms, outside their window of tolerance, not able to deepen, not able to work with the material that is presented, and resourcing like crazy. How many of your clients are doing that at the moment? And you know what? Most of them riff, exactly. And what happens is that we want to be able to understand what is it that's causing it, but there's an incapacity in the system to even begin to explain what's causing it. And so most people, when they're treating anxiety, will just go from trigger to symptoms, reframe the trigger, if possible, reframe the material that's coming at them from the trigger, settle the body in some sort of regulation technique, which is all fine. It's not helpful. But even at that trigger will show up in a different place in a different face because root cause hasn't been done. Now, I'm going to go back. I'm going to stop the share here. This on your pack, and your pack can be, Leona has sent you out an email. Okay. So, okay, where are we? See, I wrote myself notes, then I get lost because I don't remember my notes because I'm not busy talking. Okay, so fantastic. So, understanding the levels of intolerance of the body become incredibly important to the client, because the more intolerance the client has of the body and the physical symptoms of anxiety, the more likely they're going to get entrenched in their stages of process. So the link between intolerance of the body and entrenchment and rumination are inextricably linked. So the minute you see intolerance in your client, your first assessment should be that we need to build capacity. We need to build a window of tolerance. Now, what does that mean? What does building capacity mean? So if you remember the third point in the diamond model, if you have it in front of you, it's symptoms. Now, just as a matter of interest, how many of you are taught, have done any of the wonderful regulation stuff? The box breathing stuff, the dorsal vagal toning stuff. So a lot of you know how to do that, right? And that is, yep, teach it, Ruth, says you. Could start my own company, Claire, isn't that right? And do it myself, says you know it that well. So they become really, really, really important tools. But when I talk about building capacity as the third point of the model, I'm talking about building a different type of capacity. And this is where we get controversial, right? So, now, right, Rachel, buckle up, right? I'm glad we're not in a seminar and you can't throw anything at me, right? Because there is a fundamental difference between regulation and stopping the build of symptoms. Buckle up, Joe. I'm going to say that again and I'll explain it. Day 3, we'll take this apart in great detail. There is a fundamental difference between going into hyperarousal, regulating yourself back down from hyperarousal and into your window of tolerance, which is what our fabulous regulation techniques teach us. Or maybe not even hitting hyperarousal, but knowing that it comes and then being able to regulate yourself back to it. Yeah. That is what we're understanding, or is what I understand is regulation tools. Okay, so I'm not an advocate of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. They're incredibly important, but I'm talking about something at a much deeper level. I'm talking about the client regaining sovereignty, regaining agency, not waiting for the body to do its thing and then regulate. I'm talking about building such capacity that the build in the system is blocked, that it does not move itself into hypo or hyperarousal. I know that sounds crazy for anybody that has never heard this, understood this, or come into contact with my work, but I promise you the difference it makes is incredible. So we're talking not about the regulation, but the non-building. So that whenever, I'll give you an example. Whenever I would have had anxiety, all that I would have had to do was feel the flutter in my tummy, and I would have been in full panic. And there was no space between the flutter and the panic. And then I could regulate myself from the panic back. So what I'm talking about is understanding the first signal of anxiety in your body, because we can't take that away. There's not full frontal lobotomies here we're doing. We can't take away the organism's natural propensity to warn us against something, thanks be to God. But what we can do is that we can stop that build inside the client's body, and they can gain agency and sovereignty. Not when it happens, I'll be okay. Not whenever I know I can come back safely. Not that, but no, I don't go there anymore. And if you have any idea of the difference that makes, the anxiety treatment is night and day. It's night and day. We're talking about stop. I know it's hard to believe, and I'll get on. I promise you, if you stick around long enough, day 3, I'll tell you how. I'll show you it how. And I'll put this out. It might be a wee. I'm not going to put pressure on her, but I see you're smiling away. If you want to share, you're more than welcome to share, my dear. I'm not put pressure on you. Give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down. What are you at? Okay. So we have somebody with us, and she might type in the chat, so you mightn't be able to say, but she might type in the chat. We have somebody with us who has experienced that herself as a client, where we were able to stop the physical symptoms going beyond a certain point. And that's not just in her, that's in every client. I mean, Sadie, you're there too. You've seen this happen yourself. So am I saying that to qualify it? I'm not. Well, I am, but I'm saying it to give you hope, but also for you to see that this isn't just some weak air from Ireland sitting here just telling you that you can do this without evidence or without not just with just theory, as if it's some sort of idea. We've seen it in practice thousands of hours, and you'll hear from loads of people as we go on about how this is. Yeah, Ruth, and that's a really important, the familiarity of hyperarousal is comforting, and there's so much information in that, why it's comforting. It's like hypoarousal is very comforting for clients that they may not give them up, but that's just part of the resistance. And resistance is a really healthy thing to have, because it tells us so much about what is not meant. So when we talk about building capacity, we talk about spotting intolerance. Your first work is to build capacity. Now, whenever you're building capacity, yeah, guess what? Guess what you're doing when you're building this type of capacity? You're increasing metacognition. You're increasing introspection. You're increasing their stage of process. You're increasing their window of, or increasing their window of tolerance. Is that the right terminology? Maybe not, decreasing it. But you're allowing for them to come into their window of tolerance. You're building their metacognition, and you're building their introspection. Therefore, you're building their psychosomatic unity. So there are particular ways to build the window of tolerance that will add to all the skills that you need to, as you've assessed in the therapeutic process, as you've assessed in therapeutic exchange, that aren't there. So these exercises on Wednesday night, this building capacity, how do you build capacity if it's not just regulation? And I'll share that very quickly. It is the interplay between the mind and the body that create the build, which is where we're adding something fresh and new to the field. If you understand that it is the interplay between the mind and body that on 99% of the occasion, not in trauma, not in shock activation or severe trauma activation, we are actually building the nervous system activation within ourselves unconsciously. And it's a big statement. When you understand that, when you understand the interplay between the mind and the body that is happening within you, and you can control that and stop that, then not only are you adding agency to your own life, but what you're doing is that you're adding metacognition, introspection, you're adding stages of process. Now you're internalized. Now you're not externalized. Now you're not caught up in the mind's functions. Now you're working internally on yourself, with yourself and your therapist, which are you guys. And that is a game changer. Because what that does, what that work does, is that shifts the assessment that you've done at the therapeutic exchange. And then, is it safe enough? There's the key word to all of this. Safe enough to explore what lies beneath. Then it's safe enough to allow the unconscious to release, to allow, to embody what got embedded. I'm going to say that again. Then, when you have sovereignty and agency, then when you've got capacity in the system, in the organism, then and only then am I available for all of your empathy, for all of your unconditional positive regard, for all of your congruence. Then I am wide open and available to you as my therapist, but more importantly, through you, I'm available to me. I'm available to this body, I'm available to this mind, I'm available to this self that has been locked out of itself for decades, that has been petrified by itself for decades. Now, and only now, do I have both the capacity to be within and the capacity to receive what you are creating in the therapeutic relationship. Because before that, it's a game. It's a game of protection. It's a game of how much I'm willing to stretch to myself. So the important part of this is I'm not throwing the regulation tools out the window. They are going to be your best friends the whole way through this, but we're doing a different type of regulation. What we call this is the build. We're de-escalating the build that creates agency and sovereignty, and we're doing that through the mind-body interplay, the mind-body and connection. We're not just working with the body, which is what all our regulation wonderful tools are doing. What we're doing in point 3 of this model is that we are working with the interplay between the mind and the body and how important that is. So what it does to the unconscious, Joe, thank you for the question, is it creates the safety. It's not safe to be with the cause of our fears. Any of you's ever been down there? It ain't a present sight. If you've ever been down there and actually embodied what got embedded, you're re-experiencing the totality of the experience as a 2-year-old, as a 3-year-old, or whatever age this got locked in it. And you're experiencing it through the eyes of this adult, through the ears, through the senses, through the sense of self, and the metacognition of this adult. It is an horrific experience and can only be done ever so safely. Can't be pushed, can't be pulled, can't be anything other than once we create the capacity in the human being, once we create everything that I've talked about and created that level of capacity, then and only then will the unconscious material make itself available, because the unconscious material makes itself available through the body first. And then when it makes itself through the body, the mind will speak the language of the body. It'll speak the language of the wound. Now that's where the difficulty gets in, because the neuroception picks that up and warns the body of this unconscious material. But if all that wonderful work is done, the client has the capacity to report that to you. It has the capacity to tell you what's happening in their mind and what's happening in their body. But prior to any of that work, there is no capacity. How are you feeling about that? Yes, Joe, yes. Inner child work, if not done carefully, but can be harmful. The reason their nervous system is so activated is because it's fundamentally protecting. It's protecting the material that lies in the unconscious that hasn't really fully birthed through the adult consciousness yet. Good. I'm glad, Luna. Good. From Facebook, it makes sense. Good. So if I share the diamond model again, and we come back to what is it that causes what in Underlord, and then we'll finish, because I could talk for hours, as you can see, and I'm trying to not exhaust you in the first night. So what do we see? I'm going to share this screen and we'll go back. Yeah, I have that. Hold on a second. Okay. I know that's different from the one I've shown you. Sorry, Leona. Okay, so here we go. So triggers are often what is brought, what triggers. And this is part of the therapeutic exchange. What we're saying is, I want you to close your eyes to part B, because we'll talk about that in the end, day 4, right? So what we're saying is there's a huge intolerance often to both the triggers, to the material that is within. There's a huge intolerance to that. Now we understand why there's an intolerance. And what we're saying is that we have to work in the body here. And if we work in the body, if there is a huge intolerance, if we go to the body first and we work and create in capacity, but a new type of capacity, a capacity in the body and a capacity in the metacognition, a capacity, if we create that, then what happens is we stop bouncing around this top end of the diamond that most of you says that was happening for your clients. You stop that because the client has now tolerance of the symptoms. Not only have they tolerance of the symptoms, they've sovereignty over the symptoms. So now they can begin this process. Now, there's one magic thing that happens whenever it's called maps and patterns, and I'll explain it to day 3. There's a magic thing that happens with maps and patterns, that it starts to show the real core threat. And so what we find is that we get this deepening that's nearly automatic, in line with safety that's felt in the organism. When sovereignty and agency is applied, we get this safety that allows an opening, that allows the material to come forth. And what we begin to see is that we move away. I know you are looking at me thinking, how the Underlord does all of this happen? But over the next 4 days, I promise I'll break it all down for you, right? But what happens is, once that capacity, as we call it capacity, we know it's multifunctional, right? Then there's an opening to root cause. And in root cause, we can see the core and key threats that are available. Now, we have a wee case study, and we're going to end with that case study. Okay, so we have a 35-year-old woman who has a deep, deep desire to be connected, to have a family, to build a family. She would be diagnosed with insecure attachment. She has shown up as a presenting issue with relationship anxiety. Yeah, her presenting issue is, as we would imagine, anxiety, nighttime panic attacks. She's a stage 3 of process, moving to 4 sometimes, but fluctuates between 3 and 4. She has low levels of metacognition, low levels of introspection, can access, but jumps out very quickly. And in her therapeutic exchange, she's ruminating on the mistrust. She's presenting with anxiety, but wants to learn to have boundaries in relationship. Wants to understand if her partner's a narcissist. Wants to try and learn how to trust more. Wants to learn how to how to give herself more, and is confused with the triggers that she feels. And she can feel, a lot of hyper arousal. So she's constantly checking phone, she's constantly checking her partner, now her partner is very loving, very reassuring. There is no evidence, no reality of her, what may be called neurotic anxiety. She has tried to reframe. She has tried all of the lovely interventions that there is. She's tried to see him in a different way. She's tried to accept. She's tried lots of things. And she's also been faced in other therapies with the fact that this may be a nervous system stuck in survival mode, picking up false information. So she's totally confused. She's confused why her body is in hyperarousal. Yeah. She's confused why her body's in hyperarousal. She's confused with whether it is a reality or isn't a reality, because she feels it. It feels true and real to her. It has been disproved by so many therapists who said that she isn't seeing it the right way and it's just a faulty nervous system. And that maybe if she did some more body work, she would release the trauma and then she wouldn't see it that way. So she's confused because it shows up in friendships too. So it's not just in this and it's in that. And she can ruminate for hours. If you had a 5-hour session, she could tell you stories for 5 hours straight about who, what, where, when, how, when. She could tell you all of the details. But when you try to deepen, when you try to help her understand maybe what the root cause is, she can't go any further than the story she's presenting. Her body becomes too activated. She has no capacity and she's no tolerance for the hyper arousal that she feels because she shames and blames and hurts herself. And everyone around her has told her that she's just too much, that she's just oversensitive. And now she's at the stage where she wants to make her world so small because she cannot understand why she's triggered so badly, why she is in so much hyper arousal. And what she wants to do is get away from that. But yet, the essence of her being wants her to find love. It calls to her every single day to find love, to be connected, to be in connection every loving day. And so she's torn between the idea of keeping herself small and finding that she loves. And it's excruciating and exhausting. What I hope you have gathered already from this session is the first place that we are going is to the body. That is the first intervention that we need to make. That we need to build this capacity, that we need to alleviate her symptoms, that we need to bring her out of that high stress state, that we need to create tolerance so she can breathe a bit. She can understand herself a bit. That's the first step in the process. But tomorrow night, we're going to hear of about her mind's functions and the red herrings that her mind has produced to keep you busy, to keep you running the story and playing whack-a-mole. So that's the client presentation. We're going to take that client journey over the next few nights. We've already seen where our first step is likely to be, hopefully. And everybody concur with that first step? Straight to the body. There's no point deepening. There's no point aggravating her because it's not safe to try and deepen beyond what she's presenting. There's no point trying to go back in any timeline. There's no point looking for developmental trauma. There's no point. Client doesn't have the capacity nor the willingness to deepen. So we understand that there's an intolerance and we're going to work on the body. But tomorrow night, what we're going to see is how indeed that mind has made its mind up about what it is and how fixated it becomes on what it is. And how we can see that. Once you see that, you will never be able to unsee it in your client again. And when your client's mind's functions are working, you'll never not be able to see it again. It's like it comes like flashing lights. And before you understand it, you follow every little intonation and inclination that the client gives you because it seems like it's important enough for it to be presented. But when you understand the functions of the mind tomorrow night, and especially in this client, then it'll help you conceptualize and see how the functions of the mind work and how we literally do this, move it aside. How we don't follow it, how we don't follow the ruminations, how we don't follow any of that. We don't play whack-a-mole, and what the next step is. Thank you, Armandy. I didn't see your good self here. Are you sneaking in the background? I didn't see you. Okay, so how are we feeling? How are you doing? Too much? Too little? Goldilocks in between? All right. Good, Laura. Good. Good. Good pace. Was it Sadie? Good. Okay. No problem at all. And then you're going to have to teach me how to say that name. Martin Joyce is your last name. God, Kierda, maybe? Don't know.
Kierda.
What is it?
Kierda.
Kierda. Gorgeous. Beautiful, Kierda. There we are. I will forget tomorrow night, so you'll have to teach me again. Okay, thank you. Okay, fantastic. Okay. So, okay, thank you. Perfect. All right. Okay. No problem at all, Chan. We'll reach out tomorrow. All right, fantastic. So a lot to take on. I know, Ruth. I know, and I hope I haven't overwhelmed you at all. Throw some questions. If you have any questions, throw them into the chat there while everybody's heading off. If you have anything, and I'll answer those questions. And if you've no questions, then we'll see you tomorrow night, same time, and we'll try and stick to the hour. I'm trying to be good and stick to the hour. All right, Kim. Thank you. Thanks, Claire. Thanks, everybody. Bye bye, Armandy. See you later on, Doll. Bye bye. Bye, Anna. Thank you. All right, no questions. Leona, no questions on Facebook? We all good to the end?
No questions, just amazing first session and thanking you.
All right. Okay, my love. I will see you all tomorrow. Thanks, Helen. See you all tomorrow night, same time. Take care, everybody.